What is going on, guys? Today I'm going to be talking about Fate Zero, and more specifically, the three kings of Fate Zero. I guess you could kind of consider all of the heroes to be a king in some way, shape, or form, pretty much of their trait, I guess. But I am mainly going to be talking about Archer, Ryder, and Saber because I think that they were shown to be like true kings, true leaders. They definitely had the strongest titles, right? And besides that, most importantly, they were the three that sat together and drank and had a pretty interesting philosophical discussion about what it means to be a king, which is pretty much what I'm going to be looking at analyzing in this video. So first, just to break them down to their two main traits that they all differ in combinations of, okay? We have Saber, who is selfless and cares for her people. We have Ryder, who is selfish and cares for his people. And then we have Archer, who is selfish and doesn't care for his people. And don't kill me for saying that about Archer, okay? I believe he does care about his people. I think it's just that he puts himself above all others, right? He considers himself to be the most valuable person to ever exist. Where while Ryder would put himself above others, I think he truly does care about the well-being of his people and just believes that valuing himself the most is what would help them. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself there. I want to save those two for last. So let's start with Saber. Saber's ideology is very straightforward. I would say, and I'm not trying to be insulting to it, but I would say that it's kind of a childish one, right? Like when you're a little kid, when you believe that all people should be good, you don't even understand the concept of evil to an extent. Of course, there are children that do. But a lot of the time, just like how I remember people would always explain to me when I used to play World of Warcraft, the Alliance was full of little kids because little kids always want to be the good guys, right? They don't want to be the bad guys, and I feel like Saber is kind of like that in that sense. I would have to imagine that this comes from the fact that I don't know the full story of King Arthur, but I believe to an extent, for the majority of his life, he was pretty well taken care of, right? He didn't exactly understand how the world works. I believe it was at a very young age that he was able to become the King of England. So when you become a king, you kind of become a little bit different than a regular human. You don't exactly experience the real world like most people would. Even nowadays, we claim that about people who are just celebrities and whatnot, right? So I think that could be what is going on here. I think that because of that lifestyle, Saber never really got to experience the real world, understand how evil works, and what it could necessarily mean to be a king. And I don't even necessarily think this is a bad thing or that she's wrong, that she is necessarily following the wrong path of what it means to be a king. But I think that it is kind of shown that she is naive to an extent by the fact that she was pretty much put in her place by Ryder in this discussion they had, right? I mean, she didn't really have much to say to him. She just said what she believed, and he was like, no, you're wrong. We all know Ryder won that conversation, right? Like, I think we can all agree on that. She could still be in the right, but he was doing a very good job putting her in her place, and she didn't even really have any response to him in the slightest. And again, I cannot emphasize enough how much I don't think either one of these are necessarily wrong or that they're completely conflicting ideologies, especially because of the fact that after Ryder left, Archer was all like, no, you're not wrong. I like that, you have balls, you're following the path that you've chosen, that's good. And Archer, of all people, it's pretty unexpected to come from, right? Because he's a complete asshole. He doesn't really think that anyone besides himself is of any value. He's a very cool character, but he is extremely egotistical. And he was able to tell her that he actually enjoys seeing what she's doing. He doesn't think that she's necessarily making the wrong decision. So she's definitely not just flat out wrong in any way, shape, or form. And of course, when it comes to something like this, I don't think that anyone's exactly right. And then, speaking of him, let's just move on to Archer. Let's talk about him, the man who is selfish for his own sake. And again, I don't think that necessarily means he does not care about his people. In this little banquet that they had, he does talk about how he created the law, and it was to punish the people below him. And I don't think that is just because, he's a psychopath and he wants to punish people. I think the idea is he's saying that there needs to be law and order. There needs to be a way to control the people. And in his particular case, he believes that the best way to do so is to just believe in himself so that he has all the power, and anytime anyone does anything wrong, they will immediately punish, because he can just punish them because he has all the power. If he wasn't to believe in himself, of course, this wouldn't work, because then how would he be able to enforce anything? But because he believes that he is morally correct, the laws that he has made are fair, he believes he is in the right to hold all the power so he can properly pass judgment upon people. And I think it is because of this idea he has, because he can believe in himself so much, that he considers himself to be the king of heroes, because he's a king, of course. They are all kings in one regard or another, and he believes in himself more than anyone else. He has put everything in himself, given himself all the power, and he doesn't think he's really capable of making any morally wrong decisions. Of course, I'm not speaking for him. That is just how I'm interpreting it, and it does kind of seem to be that way, right? I think pretty much how he sees it is, if I have all the power, all the glory, the wealth in the world, I enjoy myself to the absolute maximum, everyone will fear me, no one will disobey these laws, so I won't even necessarily have to punish people. I'll just have to lay down the hammer once in a while to show people that I'm not screwing around here. And in the meantime, I do get to enjoy myself to the max, so that's good, right? And because of this insane confidence that this man has, I believe that, at least in terms of the heroes that we got to see in this series, I thought that every single one of them, besides one in particular, which I'll talk about later, he would have defeated in a 1v1 battle. I think he just kind of takes the cake. I think he has the most all-around ability. He has extremely good 1v1 abilities, and even more so probably like 1v an army, right? As we've seen. So yeah, I think that that's what the author was going for here. And then lastly, probably my favorite character in Fate Zero, we have Ryder, who is the selfish, but for the sake of his people type of king. So for Saber, we get a few lines and we have a pretty good idea of what her ideology is like, because it's so simple, like I explained earlier. And for Archer, you just have to do a little bit of inferring, I think, and you can kind of get a decent idea of what it's like. I think I laid it out pretty well here. But for Ryder, I mean, it's a pretty interesting philosophy. You kind of have to think about it for a sec. You have to let it soak in. But he just lays it all out for us. He goes on, gives an entire speech directed at Saber, telling her why she is wrong completely, because he is kind of the exact opposite of her. Of course, Archer is actually the complete opposite, but at least in terms of their convictions, I would say that Ryder and Saber are kind of opposites. He believes that the true way to inspire a people to be a king is to live lavishly, the same way that Archer does. He says you have to be the most angry person in times that you're angry, you have to be the loudest, you have to be the best at celebrating. You pretty much want to live kind of on levels above humanity, which is not what happens with a king, right? You kind of do everything at a much higher level. And he thinks that if you do this, you will inspire your people and make them stronger themselves. Pretty much he believes the same thing as Saber, that the people are what is most important. But instead of just taking everything on himself, taking all the pain, everything that a nation has upon himself, he decides to live as a king the way that he describes it, and he thinks that this will cause his followers to admire him. It will make them stronger because it will make them want to fight for something, want to fight for him. It's pretty much just like he's the party leader and he gives a giant raid buff to all of his people. And then when Saber asks him if he regrets everything that he did, because pretty much immediately after his death, his entire country collapsed, he says he has zero regrets at all, because if he was to go back and try and change anything, if he was to have any regrets, it would be a complete insult to all of his followers. It'd be saying like, you know what, you guys shouldn't have followed me, you were idiots. Why would you do that? I was an idiot and you shouldn't have followed me. That was not a good decision on your part. Pretty much the way that he looks at it is, whether or not we won, whether or not it was good for the future, it was a good run while it lasted. We had a great time. There were definitely some good parts even if it didn't end so well, so why should I be regretting this? And yeah, that's pretty much a summary of all these character ideologies in my opinion. I think that it's very interesting how these three were placed against each other in this story. I think that they're pretty much all opposites in different ways, like Saber versus Archer is kind of an opposite, as well as Saber versus Ryder. Not so much action going on with Archer and Ryder, but there still is something there. They both are selfish people, with one believing that all the power should be within himself and another believing that the power should be granted to the people. And I think in a 1v1 situation against the different heroes that these three would be in a kind of triangle like rock, paper, scissors. I believe that Ryder would be able to defeat Saber because I think that Saber is the most powerful person 1v1. I think that in any, like, one human body versus one human body, right? Like, she would probably destroy anyone. Her best battle was definitely Lancer, and he's probably, at least in my opinion, just kind of a shittier version of Saber. I'm sure he has some kind of advantages, but I think she has, like, the ultimate 1v1 potential. That's kind of how it was described by Kiritsugu, so yeah, I think that that is her ability, but when she goes up against someone specifically like Ryder, it just doesn't really work. She can't take down an entire army. Sure, she'll probably do a ridiculous amount of damage, but she has to deal with his entire army, which is kind of like buffed by his courage or his abilities, like I was saying, and then himself too, which I don't know how valuable he really is, but he has an entire army, so. But Ryder is far from invincible. I think that there could be two heroes, and definitely at least one that could defeat him. It's pretty much already been explained that Archer could almost certainly defeat Ryder in any situation. He pretty much has the ultimate ability to defeat him. I think to an extent he kind of has the ultimate ability of all the heroes we've seen. And it just happens to be extremely useful for taking down Ryder. It pretty much, I think he is the second best at 1v1ing, like Saber being number one. I think Lancer is pretty good, but I think Archer would take the cake. I think that his ability is extremely overpowered, definitely more overpowered than anyone's, even including Ryder. Mainly because I think it's extremely versatile while still being ridiculously powerful in all of those regards. Like, in a 1v1 situation, sure, it kind of does seem to specialize in, like, area of effect kind of attacks, but, I mean, if you just launch all those attacks at one person, that's still super effective too. But yeah, while I do think it still would be useful in a 1v1, I think it definitely would completely decimate Ryder's army. I don't think he would stand any chance at all, so there is the perfect counter towards Ryder. And then I think that Saber would be able to defeat Archer. I think that he could probably beat every single hero besides her, because he is, even with his ridiculous ability, just one man, and then she is pretty much the ultimate at taking down something that is just one man. I think she'd have a little bit difficult of a time getting to him. I don't think it would be over in just no time, but she'd probably be able to deflect the majority of the ability he was throwing at her, and then she would just get in there and fuck him up, right? Like, what can he really do at close range? We've never really seen that. It could very well be nothing. And what is so beautiful about all of this is when you take a step back and you just don't care about who is killing each other and whatnot, you just look at their abilities and how they match up with their ideologies. Ryder has the ability to summon a massive army who are all decently powerful people because he is encouraging them. They all admire him, they want to serve him, he is their king, and they want to do whatever it is they can do to help him, and that makes him extremely powerful in that regard. Then you have Archer, who pretty much is just a single man who has all the power concentrated in him. He has all this wealth, all this weaponry that he has such an abundance of, he just launches it at you, right? He just launches ridiculous weaponry at you, where there's seemingly no end to it, which is just crazy. I really like how that represents his ideology. And then you have Saber, who, like I said, I think would be the ultimate 1v1er. I think that this makes perfect sense since she is willing to sacrifice everything. She's willing to endure all the pain and concentrate all the strength within herself so that she can make it easier for her people, for her country and whatnot, to live peaceful lives. So she can take all the pain on herself. I think it is more than a fitting ability. It's not really an ability, but it's just kind of what she does, right? She's the ultimate 1v1er, and I think that that makes perfect sense. So, yeah, that's pretty much all I gotta say about this. I really did enjoy Fate Zero. I kind of enjoyed, I feel like, the wrong things. I think a lot of people really just enjoyed seeing all the cool fights and whatnot, and as much as I did like that, I really liked all the philosophy going on in this show, and I'm kind of considering seeing the rest of the Fate series, whatever. I've only seen Fate Zero as of now. I really don't even understand what order I'm supposed to watch it in, since I have seen so many different ideas of what people said is the correct order, so I don't really get it. It seems kind of like a hassle to get into. Maybe you guys could explain it to me in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, remember to give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. Remember to leave me a comment letting me know what you thought about this video, if you enjoyed it, if you'd like to see more similar stuff to this, and any ideas you have for future videos, One Piece related, other anime related, whatever, different ideas for things you would like me to see if I have not already. I hope you guys have an excellent start of your weekend, and I'll talk to you on Sunday.